This program is a partnership with the Cumberland County Improvement Authority and is a week-long virtual event featuring visits with local artists, live and pre-recorded programming from environmentally minded organizations, and a daily Kids Eco Camp each morning. Please join us tomorrow, Tuesday, August 18th at 10 a.m. for Kids Eco Camp Newspaper Baskets Live Part 1, where I'll be sharing some tips and tricks on how to start your newspaper basket weaving. And then again at 6 p.m. with Dr. Sam Moyer, which will be an artist demonstration where he talks about his process and the crafting of his brooms. Right now, we are joined by Sal Mangiafico, who is going to speak to us about your local watershed, but more on that in just a little while. Before we get started, we want to make sure that you have a comfortable viewing experience. To that end, it is my pleasure to introduce Maurice Peterson, who will be handling all of our technical needs throughout the program. Maurice has been with WheatonArts since 1994. She's the IT director, and her undergraduate and graduate studies were in fine art, e-business, marketing, and public relations. Maurice, before we get started, can you provide us with some tech tips for this webinar?
Yes, and they're going to sound it just like they did at 6 o'clock, but I want to make sure that everybody that's joining us just now has all the same advantages. So this is a webinar, a Zoom webinar. You see the panelists. They will not see you, however. You can ask the speaker questions in the little box called Q&A. So that Q&A is at the bottom of your screen if you're on a laptop, and on a tablet, they're usually at the top. There is a little bit of a difference there. They will try, the speaker and the host will try to answer your questions out loud. The host, Pam, may also be able to answer your questions by typing into that Q&A. You can also like other attendees' questions. Doing so helps the host identify the most popular questions. Click the thumbs up to like that question. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the program for your technical and for your general questions, and I'll also share some links with some details. In the chat box, you can do two things. Follow along for links for additional resources and text between yourself and other attendees in the chat box. Should you lose connection for any reason, don't worry, just go back to your original email and click. You can come and go, and it will not affect your ability to experience and attend this webinar. The session is being recorded, so it will be provided to you at a later time, and you can share it with your friends and family. However, only the host and the panelists will be heard and recorded. One last tip for you is regarding the customizing of your experience. Over in the upper left-hand corner is a very small green icon. You can click on that icon and look at different things that you can do to customize your experience. For this particular webinar, the only thing that you really might consider is to click that green icon, look at the accessibility tab, and if you would like to make your chat font larger so that it's easier for you to read, you may do so right there. Otherwise, I think you are going to be all set for this experience. And I welcome you to this free webinar, and if you would like to consider supporting WheatonArts, there are 3 ways to do so: membership, donations, and shop.wheatonarts.org, and we would love to have any of that support at this time. And so you know, members get it all, and I won't go over all these, but please keep in mind that you can be a member and support us, and you can also buy a friend or family member a gift membership. They're always available. And as I mentioned not too long ago, is that 15% off will come off your entire cart. But we're highlighting right here our wild clay pots from South Jersey clay that is cultivated just 1 mile from WheatonArts by our own resident potters. And our partner in Eco Week, our virtual eco fair, is Cumberland County Improvement Authority, and they are providing their free eco shopping bag compliments of CCIA to anyone that purchases, whether you have your item shipped or whether you take part of or take advantage of our curbside pickup. And now without further ado, we're going to move on to our programming, and it's my pleasure to once again introduce you to Pamela Wakeman, who is a ceramic artist, arts administrator, and educator. She's taught for Rowan University and for WheatonArts, and you may have met her running the family activities on site at WheatonArts. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts at Rowan University and her Master's of Science at Drexel University. Her favorite thing about teaching and creating art is the challenge it presents to find new approaches to understanding and interpreting the world around us. And thank you again for being here and hosting, Pam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Marcy, for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this program, during which we are hearing from Sal about local watersheds. Before I introduce him, I would like to draw your attention to our 50th anniversary logo in the bottom left-hand corner. That is because it is our 50th anniversary this year of WheatonArts, and we are very proud to say that. If you go to our website, wheatonarts.org, you'll be able to click through a slideshow of all the pictures from the last 50 years. It's very interesting to look at those, so I do encourage you to do so. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce Sal. He conducts public education and research concerning water conservation and preventing water pollution. He works with a diverse clientele in Cumberland and Salem counties, including municipalities, watershed associations, environmental organizations, and agricultural producers. Sal teaches 2 classes for undergraduates, one on statistical analysis for outreach program evaluation, and one on the social and environmental aspects of turf grass in the United States. Sal has been a faculty member with Rutgers Cooperative Extension since 2009. Thank you so much for joining us, Sal. I'm very excited to talk about watersheds tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see if this works.
Excellent. There it is.
Okay, sorry, hang on a second. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone. Just give me a minute. Something strange happened.
Take your time, it's fine. We were seeing your screen, so that's half the battle right there. And as Pam Burton said, the hardest
it is the hardest part.
is getting your presentation up. So it happens. And I have a copy of your presentation, so if you wanted me to open that, I could do that too. Oh, there you go. And now you just click slideshow, and from the beginning.
Perfect. Looks great.
Excellent.
Well, now, Sal, I think you're muted. So just unmute for me, and then we'll be able to hear. Yep, there you go.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here and bearing with me with hopefully the worst of our technical difficulties. Although I am going to, in this presentation, I will be switching between my presentation and my web browser. So hopefully that'll go fairly smoothly. The idea of my presentation tonight is to talk about some websites and also phone applications that we can use to explore our watersheds. So we all know about there's so many websites and phone applications that give us access to so much data. So I just wanted to highlight a few things that are useful for exploring the watershed. There we go. That's me actually in the water, so I'm not always sitting in front of a computer. Okay, the first website I wanted to discuss tonight is called Openstreetmap. And what Openstreetmap is, you can think of it as a mapping system, a project, or all the data that goes into a map. So it's not necessarily a single website or a single map interface, but it's the data that's behind it. One thing that's really nice about OpenStreetMap is it is open access. So it's got basically an open database license. So there's a lot of different websites will use that data because it's not proprietary the same way like something like Google Maps is. It's based on a wiki model of editing. That is that anyone can go in and edit the data, just the same way that like Wikipedia is set up so that users can go in and edit the data. What's really nice about that is that it allows anyone to add in features that are around them, whether that's urban features like, say, stores, or natural features like rivers, or say a wildlife management area. So the advantages of it are that it is free, it's royalty free, as I mentioned, so it's not a proprietary, data. What's also really nice about it is in a lot of applications, so for example, in phone apps, you can download, say, an entire state map with all the roads and all the points of interest. So you can use it without having a mobile signal. So I found that really useful in a couple of situations. One time, some years ago, when I went to Canada and I didn't bother to get mobile service in Canada. So for navigating, driving, I was able to download where I was, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and the software I had on my phone was able to navigate for me. So that worked out really, really well. The other time it's worked out really well is being in places, for example, sort of like central Pennsylvania, where I didn't have a mobile signal. But again, I could download all the data for Pennsylvania. And so you have that ability to have navigation and to see other points of interest. Or for example, if you're somewhere fairly remote, say out hiking, again, you may not have a mobile signal. So some of the apps can be used for navigation, just the same way you might use Google Maps on your phone to navigate for you. It's also useful, for example, I've used it for hiking, because some places people have gone through and put in, for example, hiking trails or things like shelters or water sources. So it's really neat to have that. And a lot of times those things may not be included in proprietary sources like Google Maps, say. As I mentioned, OpenStreetMap is really just the data that's behind the map. So there's lots of different websites or applications you can use to access it. On the phone, for one of them is called OSMAND, which would stand for OpenStreetMap Android. Another popular one is called Maps.me, but there's really quite a few of them. And you can look up comparisons of all the ones you could use, say, on iOS or use on Android. And some of them are kind of tailored specifically for certain uses like hiking or biking or driving navigation. And so also the look of the map and what objects are shown, say by default, varies by the application. Again, it's not so much a map in itself, it's all the data that's behind the map. So the application can determine what is shown there. So for example, this is just a different view than my first slide. I mean, the way it's rendered is just different, but the underlying data might be the same. Okay, so how would one add to the map? It's pretty easy to do from the computer, from a web browser, or there is special software that can be used. One is called the Java OpenStreetMap editor, which is useful for sort of more advanced things. But for simple additions or changes to the map, you can do it right on the web browser. And then there's also applications that can be used on your phone to do that. So some are kind of geared for simple editing, like if you wanted to say add a business, that's just a point on the map you could add, whereas others are a little bit better on more advanced editing tasks. So basically, when you add to the map, you're not supposed to use other maps to add things, right? So you're not supposed to like go on Google because that's their data, and you're not supposed to, go on Google Maps and then copy their data onto Openstreetmap. But you could use, for example, local knowledge. Like, for example, I happen to know that Rita's Italian Ice is on this corner, so I could add that to the map if it's not already there. You can use aerial imagery, and perhaps, or you can use on-the-ground GPS. So, for example, if you were adding trails, say in a park, you could map it right from being there yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do, and we'll see if this works, I'm going to try to switch to the map itself, and I'm going to share. Okay. So you should be seeing OpenStreetMap. Happen to be at Bridgeton right now, which is near where I live. So let's see. I'm just going to scoot down to start. I'm going to scoot down to Shepherd's Mill Pond, which is down in Greenwich. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to show you, because I've added some of this data myself, so you can kind of see what's possible. One thing is I added the boundary of the wildlife management area there. So that's part of the Cohansey Wildlife Management Area. That's that green line. I've also gone through and added the access road, the boat ramp, the beach, and then also all the trails that are through here. So again, I just did that by walking the trails, mapping them using my phone. There's a couple of nice viewpoints out here where you can often see bald eagles. And a lot of this underlying data had been imported by other people sometime in the past. So you can kind of see where there's wetland areas, there's water, etc. So that was fairly easy to do. I think rather useful for times that I've been hiking back there. It's useful to have a map on your phone. Again, you can just download that data, so you don't need a signal. And even though I live in Greenwich, I happen to not get a mobile signal in Greenwich. So I like that. Let me just quickly scoot up again to Bridgeton itself.
So Sal, I have a question. When people are adding to the map, you said it's kind of wiki style. So does that have to go through any approval, or does it go right onto the map?
Yeah, there's not really an approval process. But in the same way that Wikipedia kind of has people who look out for people being mischievous or being troll-like, if something's unusual, it'll usually get caught by another user. And I have to say, I haven't seen anything bizarre ever happen on the map. I guess whereas I guess something like Wikipedia, people may have a political agenda or something, or maybe just, want to have fun and be a troll and put in some weird information. I guess maybe there's not the same kind of temptation on a map, like,
Sure.
Okay, so let me scoot into Bridgeton a little bit, and we'll just take a look at Commerce Street. So in a different environment here, you can see this is Commerce Street in Bridgeton. There's a lot of little stores here, which you can see are just indicated with these icons. So Nick's, I think that's a barber shop of some kind. Carrasco's little grocery store. There's a Bank of America, Gallery 50, and so on. So these are just entered as points, so to speak. And Seatown Supermarket is added as an area there. So what's really nice about the reason I bring up this Openstreetmap is it's a nice way to, to contribute to knowledge about your area. So you can put in things like hiking trails or other things of interest in your watershed. Let me scoot back to my presentation. Okay. The next thing I wanted to speak about is the Web Soil Survey. So we do have soil surveys in this country, and they're so this is the old style where you'd have a book that would have a map, a printed map. You'd go and you'd look, and you can see on the map there where there's some delineation about different types of soils. And then you could go into the book itself and you look up those types of soils, and it would give you, all kinds of useful information about the soil. So of course we don't print these books anymore. Instead, the USDA has this information online, and that is the Web Soil Survey, which is the most current information on soils. So this is a really helpful tool to look up what soils you might have in your yard, for example, or around you. And as we were discussing in the last presentation, there are site characteristics that are useful to know in determining what kind of plants you may want to plant, right? As well as other things. I mean, if you're if you need to build something or install a septic system, it's really important to have some idea about the soil characteristics. Just give you a little bit of background on soil surveys. As far as I know, they were begun just at the end of the 19th century, with some of the earliest surveys being done near Elkton, Maryland, also in the Connecticut River Valley, where they grew tobacco. I'm from Connecticut, and at least when I was a kid, they still grew a lot of tobacco, and it was a shade-grown tobacco that was used for the wrappers for cigars. So it was a very high-quality crop. I don't know how much they still grow, but at least when I was a kid, it was still grown a lot right in the Connecticut River Valley. One thing to know about soils is that they are classified in a hierarchical fashion, something similar to how we classify organisms in biology, right? So the most specific classification is called a series, and that's something like a species in biology. And actually, the Web survey, or the soil survey, will actually describe units even a little bit more specific than series, that they call map units. But often we kind of talk about series. So the Web Soil Survey is the official product of the USDA, that's the US Department of Agriculture, NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is the agency in the federal government that deals with soils and soil conservation. So using the Web Soil Survey is really the most up-to-date data. So a few things that are listed in the survey. One thing is that it does indicate prime farmland or farmland of state importance. So this may be useful just in general terms of understanding, say, what's in your watershed. If we have prime farmland in the watershed, that's something we're interested in preserving due to its agricultural importance. But also looking at, for example, in your watershed or say in your yard, things like the texture of the soil, that is how sandy it is or how clayey it is, the drainage, which is really important, that's how wet it is or how droughty it is, and that's really important for knowing what kind of plants will grow there well. The depth to water table is also really important for knowing what kind of plants will grow well. Some plants don't mind getting their feet wet, so to speak. Other plants don't like that at all. Also, the water holding capacity, which is how much water the soil can hold. If you have a real sandy soil, even if it rains a bunch, the soil may not be able to hold much for the plants. Whereas if you have more of a nice loamy soil, it's able to hold more water for the plants. And so maybe that it doesn't need to be irrigated as often. And so these are really important to know for growing plants, say in your yard, but also for all kinds of other things. As I mentioned, if you're trying to site somewhere for a septic system, these are really important factors. If you're going to build a building, it's really important to know some of this stuff for knowing if the soil is going to support that building, these kind of things. And so this is just a real nice tool you can use. And I use this all the time with both homeowners and farmers in my line of work because they have questions. And it's really useful if you just know their address to be able to pop that in, look up what soil's there, and give them some information about the characteristics of that soil. It's a website that's fairly easy to use, but it can be a little, I'll go through it real quick, but you can look up by address, or you can look up by county, or even your current location. You define what they call an area of interest, so you kind of block out where you're interested in, and then you can look at the map of the soil series, and then you can look up each of those series and see what information you need. One thing to note is when they've constructed these maps, obviously they don't have a soil scientist coming out and looking at every square foot of the earth. So to some extent, they're estimated based on, they have gone out and done sampling, sometimes have dug pits to characterize the soil. But from there, they extrapolate based on, for example, the topography. So if you know a certain kind of soil is at the bottom of a hill, you can extrapolate to what's on the top of the hill based on our knowledge of soils and how they're related. Okay, so let me try to switch back over. Okay, so this is the opening page for the web soil survey. You hit the start button here. And let's see. So I'm going to search, and we'll go back to Shepherd's Mill in Greenwich. Let's see if that works. Nope. My notes are not entirely accurate on how to find it. Okay. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. We'll just zoom in, and we'll get to where we get to. Just bear with me for a second. There's Bridgeton. So as I mentioned, it's fairly easy to navigate around. You can just zoom in, use the hand tool to move around. It looks like Shepherd's Mill right there. Okay, so we're back at where I showed you on the Openstreetmap. So we'll just select an area, more or less at random. Let's say we're interested in this area. Then we move over to the soil map. And so over on the left here, it will tell you So it gives you the map. And we can see, so for example, there's this map unit symbol doc B, which is a fairly large portion, say, of kind of the access road when we're coming in. So maybe we're interested in that. And it tells us that's a downer. That's the series name is downer. Loamy sand, that's the texture. 0 to 5% slopes. And it's 20% of the area of interest that we picked. So if we click on that, it'll give us some information.
Sal, who's inputting
Sure.
all this information into the map?
This is an official USDA product. So this has been, over the last 120 years, this is the data that the federal government's been gathering. So it'll tell you, there may be some things in here that are of interest. I happen to have downer soil at my house, so I know a little bit about it. I seem to have trouble.
What is that?
Downer is simply the series name, right? So it's got certain characteristics that we're able to classify it in sort of the same way we can classify a biological species based on its characteristics. And soils are sort of related in the same way, right? Like we know if we can describe a tiger well enough, we know it's a tiger. And it may be related to a lion, but there's some differences, right? It's kind of a similar thing. So for example, here it gives you the typical profile. It's a loamy sand is common, tells you where you might find it. But also down here, the drainage class, it's well drained. So certainly we don't have to worry about if we put in a septic system, it's probably fine for that because the water will drain. If we have plants that may worry about getting their feet wet, that's probably fine. And so there's that kind of information it gives you. And you could actually, on this website, you can also get like a whole report on your area of interest that'll give you some information. So it's pretty easy, for example, to go say to your yard, define that area of interest, go and see what kind of soils you have, and learn some things about what's there.
And for all of our attendees, I just put the website address in the chat, so you can click on that link and go and bookmark that website.
And I'm just going to switch back to there we go. Okay. There's also one thing that's kind of interesting too. There is a phone app called Soil Web that you can get for either Android or iPhone, and it accesses the same USDA soil data, and it'll use your location, and then it has links to the information about the soils and the series description, etc. So that's really useful if you're somewhere and you have that app to see what kind of soil's there and just get some information about it. And that's just a screenshot from the app itself.
Now, how can people find some of this useful? Can you give us a little bit of information about that, how they would use that information?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, as I was saying, for me, there's a couple of things, a couple of ways it's useful. One is sort of generally understanding your watershed or your environment and what's there. Probably for this audience, what's also really useful is understanding things like the soil characteristics in terms of what plants you can plant, or we probably, I mean, we probably have some idea. Like if you have a real sandy soil, you probably know it. If you have a clayey soil, you probably know it. But that information is really useful in determining, for example, how often you need to irrigate or how deeply you can irrigate. You know, if you have a real sandy soil, you may need to irrigate more often, but put down less water because the soil is not able to hold as much water. Okay, I've got a little bit of time still. I'm going to go over another website called, this is a USGS product, so it's the US Geological Survey, and it's a website called StreamStats. One thing that's really nice about this website is it makes it easy to delineate the area draining to any point. And so if you're interested, for example, let's say you have a lake nearby, it's really useful to be able to delineate what land drains to that lake in order to determine what features in that landscape may be impacting that lake, right? So if it would, you know, you could look and say like, here's this little pond in my neighborhood, or, you know, it's a lake I'm interested in because I go kayaking there. You know, what areas drain to it? Are there urban areas that drain to it? Is it mostly farmland? And it gives you some sense of if there were to be any impacts on that lake, like if you have an algae bloom, what land uses might be impacting it. And so the StreamStats site, it gives a bunch of sort of useful characteristics for that area. Things like the total drainage area, the percent forest cover, and some information on flow statistics. So watershed delineation, traditionally what we used to do is we'd use topographic maps. And if you get good at doing that, it's pretty easy to delineate the watershed that drains to a certain point, just based on the contour lines on that topographic map. More current technology is you can use GIS, which is Geographic Information System software, to delineate watersheds using what they call a digital elevation model. So this kind of data is available. For example, New Jersey is really good at having a lot of GIS data freely available, but it does require having some GIS software, which you can get pretty good stuff for free. But it's really not that simple or intuitive to use. And so what's really nice about having websites like the StreamStats one is that it makes it easy so that anyone can do it without having to, you know, download software, download data, and then learn to use that software. Okay, so let me switch again to this website. And we'll see how this one goes. Oops. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a USGS, US Geological Survey product. So again, it's another official federal government product. And so you can search by a bunch of things here as well. So this time I'm going to go to, oh, I guess, I'm actually going to go back to Bridgeton. And you have to zoom in enough. It says to level 15. Where'd we go? or closer. Here you actually have to select which data set you're using, which is New Jersey for us. And that puts in where it thinks the streams or ephemeral streams are. We're going to go to delineate. So this is Sunset Lake in Bridgeton. And let's see if we can delineate the watershed that includes Sunset Lake. It is working on it. Still working on it. And so basically you could pick any point on one of these. Nope, didn't like that one. You could pick any point on any of these blue lines to determine what land area is draining to that. Okay, we'll try again. And it's working on it. There we go. So what it shows you in yellow here is the land area that drains to Sunset Lake. So this is north of Bridgeton, includes some of Shiloh, it includes Upper Deerfield, Hopewell up here. So that looks pretty simple, but that's something that with other types of software actually takes quite a bit of work to get to. So for example, Sunset Lake is somewhere where I do some water quality sampling, and it's of interest locally because it's one of the few places that swimming is allowed. This year, actually, swimming is allowed, which is somewhat unusual. The health department has to monitor it for bacteria levels. So we've been lucky that it's been low enough, but it's just a great resource to have, especially in a community that's got some disadvantages, to have a place where kids can go swimming in the summer. So we as a community are interested in what land areas are draining to that lake, because we're concerned with bacteria loads in particular, but other pollutants into the lake. So this gives us a tool to look at this, and then if I'll hit continue here. And then I think what may just be the easiest, there's a few different options of different information you can find, flow statistics. There's a neat little tool somewhere in here where it'll determine where a raindrop anywhere in that watershed will go, based on all the elevations, where it'll flow to. But I think one thing that's kind of simple for our purposes here, I'm just going to select these basin characteristics. And it's working on it. We'll continue. And so in this case, it kind of just pops up a report. What's nice is it gives you the map of the area you're looking at, and then it just gives you some interesting characteristics. For example, here, drainage area, 45.7 square miles. Forest cover is 11%. Population density, interestingly, about 200 people per square mile. So there's information like that that gives us, it's a lot of information, that without tools like this are fairly difficult to gather. But that gives us a lot of information in understanding, in this case, what area drains to Sunset Lake and what that area is like. And of course, we could use other tools, for example, looking at the land uses there. So we could look at where the forest cover is, where the urban areas are, etc., where the wetlands are. Okay. Let me jump back to my presentation.
While you're doing that, Sal, we have
Sure.
a question. Someone wants to know, what do you find interesting in the Cumberland County area compared to other areas? What is unique?
That's an interesting question. One of the things I really love about Cumberland County is that we have a lot of places to go kayaking here, like a lot of little lakes, as well as having the bay shore. We, of course, have a lot of land that's devoted to agriculture, and a lot of that is preserved as well. Those things may not be entirely unique, but they really do characterize the area. There's a surprisingly high number of bald eagles in the area. Seems like I see them all the time.
Yeah, I've seen a lot as well.
My wife has a story from when her kids were younger, and they were in the car, and she's like, look, bald eagle, bald eagle. And they're like, yeah, Mom, we see them all the time. And it's so different for me, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Connecticut, so but I remember the first time I was in Washington State and I saw a bald eagle when I was in my 20s, and it was just amazing to me. And now it's like you just see them all the time, either hanging out around a lake or eating on a carcass or something. So okay, I have just a few minutes, so let me hit the last website real quick. I've switched between the presentation and my browser so many times, and I still don't quite have it down pat, do I? Okay, so the last website I wanted to present, it's another mapping website. It's called New Jersey Conservation Blueprint, and it's a partnership of a few different organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, Rowan University, New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and some others. And this is another one where it's a quick geographic information systems tool. In this case, focused on natural resources, although it has some other built environment type information too. As I mentioned, the state of New Jersey has a lot of geographic information that are available for us, but using it and using the software isn't always the simplest thing. It's really nice having these websites that you can go to, get the information you want, or make a map that you want really easily. And there's some other tools too. The New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection does have something called GeoWeb, which also has a lot of useful information. It's a little clunkier than some other tools. And what's interesting about this New Jersey Conservation Blueprint site is that it has some kind of pre-made maps. So that, for example, there's one that focuses on agriculture. There's one that focuses on green space. There's one that focuses on ecology. And there's one that focuses on water quality. And there's enough, it's customizable enough that you can get a lot of, no matter which one you kind of start with, you can put in a lot of information that you're interested in. There's a lot of possible, what we call layers in there, that you can you can either show or not show. They break them up into boundary layers, component layers, reference layers, which is just kind of a way to sort them. But there's a lot of interesting stuff, including things like municipal boundaries, even land parcels, but then other things like vernal pools, wetlands, things like rivers, other water bodies, roads, open space. There's a lot in there. So let me see real quick if I can scoot over to it.
Now, Sal, I'm not sure if there's any of these websites that you have that can track, the maps and the geography of the lands. A companion one, I would assume, would be one that can track wildlife. And I'm wondering if anyone has done any studies that compare the two and how the geography and everything is affecting wildlife, and how the watersheds and the lands that are affecting a certain area of water has affected wildlife. Are there websites that do that?
That's a really interesting question. There is some data from DEP in terms of protected areas, and what I'm about to show is some of the ecological important areas. But I don't know how much we have of specific, or something like vernal pools that's really important to certain wildlife. But I don't know specifically of something like that shows specific wildlife.
There's someone's thesis.
Okay, just give me 1 minute, and we're running out of time, but I did just want to bring this up quickly. I need to, share my screen. Okay. One of these days I'll get it. So maybe if I can find. Okay, so a boundary layer. I'm going to add the municipalities quick. So I was just going to look for Pilesgrove. There's Woodstown. So we'll just zoom in around this Woodstown Pilesgrove area quickly. So for example, this map, it gives you a priority of lands in terms of their ecological importance. Right, so you see around Woodstown. Over to the right here is some of like the Upper Salem River. So it's got some, medium to medium low ecological importance. I mean, what's kind of neat here, you could even add in parcels. So if you're interested in specific parcels of land with the block and lot. And maybe we'll just look at, for example, vernal pools. There we go. Probably have to zoom out a little bit to see them. But for example, you see in these circles, those are buffer areas for vernal pools. And vernal pools are real important for certain types of wildlife. You could also look at open space, preserved farmland, look at wetlands, different classifications of streams. So again, a real just useful, easy tool to understand what's going on in your environment, say in your watershed. There we go. Okay, so that's about it. I guess I can end it there. So hopefully some of these tools inspire people a bit to just access the tremendous amount of data we have, either from the state or from the federal government, in order to understand, say, our watersheds, our environment, what's going on around. To me, it's just an amazing wealth of information that we have.
Absolutely. I can imagine it would take so long to kind of sift through all that. So it's really nice to be able to go back through and look at those websites that you shared. And all those, from what I could tell, Marcy or I have added them to the chat, which
Okay.
once this webinar is over, we're going to download that and we can share that with everybody. So if anyone wants to, if anyone wasn't able to jot those websites down or go to those links during the presentation, you can do so at a later time. I know, thank you very much, Sal, for being with us. I know Marcy has some wrap-up information for us before we end tonight. So I'll pass it over to you, Marcy.
Well, I just want to thank you, Sal. I find that incredibly interesting. And I remember looking at these maps over 10 years ago when I was subdividing some property and we were looking at the wetlands. And it's just, I hope people take a chance to look at them. And I did take right from your presentation and put those links into the chat so people can click on them. And look at them. I just found it was even gravitational anomalies were noted on those maps, and the fact that we have so many what seemed like sand dunes. Excuse my use of the words, you can correct me. But it is absolutely incredible. And how do you feel about the technology that is developing and so quickly? To me, it seems like we're really standing on the shoulders of the people that have done the work before us and that we're advancing so much faster in the field.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, some of this information we've had for quite a while. It's just now we have the technology to make it available to people in a way that we really haven't before.
And is it easier to engage people in conversation because you can refer to that, or are they overwhelmed?
Well, mostly people, when people come in, sometimes they have questions. Could be homeowners, could be farmers. They might have questions about their soil. And it's just so nice to be able to very quickly just kind of pull up a report form and say, this is what it is. And, this is what I'm seeing. Sometimes while they're on the phone or while they're in the office. Great.
Well, thank you again. I'm going to share your information now. So if you have further questions for Sal or for Pam, and as I've mentioned before, we'd like to hear about some of the other programs that you might want to see WheatonArts and our partners put on. We're so fortunate to have such a wealth of information. And again, I'll just reiterate, please let us know whether you're emailing Pam about programs or me about that chat or the recording. Either way, just drop that information in the email. And again, I'm just going to remind you that you can go and get your 15% off at WheatonArts shop.wheatonarts.org, and this is throughout the month of August. And Dr. Talmay's book is in the shopping cart, and you'll get your free eco bag. And we'll look forward to hearing from you. And Sal, thank you again for a great evening. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. It was great seeing you guys. Bye.
Goodbye all.
Bye.